Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of Sasquatchers. As always, I am joined by John, and today's episode is super cool, super special. We have uh, Preston Dennett, who is, in my opinion, one of the most prolific paranormal investigators to ever grace the field. I have heard him speak many times. He's appeared on Art Bell 3 times, I believe. He has written somewhere around 30 books, over 100 articles about UFOs, paranormal, and we are lucky enough to have him with us today. So, without further ado, Preston, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Hope you are too.
Yeah, we are doing excellent. Thank you again. We spoke before we started to record. I just wanted to reiterate uh, on the show how grateful we are to have you, and how honestly for the last 2 weeks excited I've been to have this conversation.
He has been. I can verify.
That's
You
awesome. Yeah, I love it.
you've been doing this for longer than I've been alive, honestly, to kind of put that into perspective. I believe you started your research in 1986. Is that correct?
That's right. I was pretty young when I started, 21 years old. But yeah, it's been 35, almost 40 years now.
So, what sparked your interest in ufology and the paranormal?
Well, it's not something I was looking for. I kind of got dragged into it kicking and screaming. I didn't like the subject of UFOs. I didn't believe in the paranormal, not ghosts, life after death, anything really at all paranormal. But that, of course, changed. It happened on November 17, 1986. I'll never forget that day because, yeah, that changed everything when I saw a report on the news about a sighting, a UFO sighting over Alaska. And now, of course, it's a very famous sighting of a Japanese commercial airliner, which was followed by a UFO for miles, for like an hour. They all, of course, saw it, and it was on radar and all this stuff. The news report didn't give any of that. It just kind of talked about the sighting in a very joking way. But it was interesting to me because this was a pilot. And I'm thinking, well, he should know better. He must be seeing a reflection off the ice cap. But turned out my older brother, Mark, he's, gosh, I don't know, 6, 7 years older than me. Some years earlier, I think I was about 14, he came running into the house saying he'd seen a UFO. And I didn't believe him back then. But after hearing this news report, I asked him about it. And he described this amazing sighting. Just a classic flying saucer, which he chased in his car. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And he's like, no, no. I mean, it had little lights on it, a dome on top, was totally silent. And he said, you know my friends Phil and Greg? I'm like, sure. He said, they were with me. Talk to them. They will tell you exactly what we saw. So I did. And they confirmed his story. And that's when I started asking other people. And I found out, I would say about a third of the people that I knew had had either a UFO sighting or a near-death experience or a ghostly encounter or a dream which came true or a Bigfoot encounter or something paranormal. So yeah, it literally hit home for me. That's how I got involved.
So, just one news report changed your life forever, essentially. That's crazy to think, like, the next almost 40 years of your life just it changed because of it. That's amazing how sightings like that can have that type of effect on somebody. um, i I had one myself a couple of years ago, and I'll never forget it because it happened on July 4th, and I was walking and I saw these, like, just this, almost, I'd say it was kind of an orb, and it kind of went up in the sky, and I thought it was a firework display. So I stopped to watch it, and then it just stayed there and stayed there and stayed there, and eventually spread into three different orbs. And they started to kind of almost dance with each other in the sky, just almost this
Right.
ballet, so to speak. And the feeling that I get, even just thinking about that, it lasted 30 minutes. And, I wasn't terrified or scared or anything. And it almost gave me like a warm feeling inside that, like, it was welcoming almost. And yeah, I'll just never forget that. So it's crazy that something like that can just change you. So is that
That's
how
awesome.
you is that how you got into MUFON, or did that come later?
That came a little bit later, but I just need to back up and comment on that sighting of yours. That's amazing. I did a study of people who saw sightings on the 4th of July because it turns out that is the most common day in the entire year to see UFOs.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I thought it was fireworks, but I looked into it and it's not. Because those party lanterns which go up into the sky,
That's
they can only
exactly what I thought it was. Yeah.
but they can only last 15 minutes. They don't
Right.
last longer than that. And of course, they don't dart around and split into two. No, they're coming down to show off because there's a lot of people outside on that night. And I think to watch the fireworks. But yeah, that sounds like a crazy sighting.
Yeah,
And it's,
that's cool that you said that, because I find that very validating. Because even when I share that with people, a lot of times I feel discredited because it happened on July 4th. So
yeah, I had my first good sighting on July 20th. And my first thought was it was a firework because it was a little orb too. But yeah, I got involved in MUFON probably 88, about a year into it, because it wasn't good news finding out UFOs were real. Not for me. It was upsetting because this wasn't taught in schools. This was being joked about and ridiculed, and nobody believed in it. And it was, yeah, upsetting. I felt scandalized almost because people I loved and trusted were keeping secrets from me. That's kind of how I felt. And I had to buy all the books I could find because I'm like, I'm going to disprove these guys. They've got to be wrong. This can't be real. And of course, the books showed the opposite, that this was real and there was a cover up. And I just kept getting deeper and deeper into this quicksand of the UFO field. And finally, I'm like, you know what? I need to figure this out, and found out about MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. And of course, I signed up. I'm like, send me your newsletter. In fact, send me the past 20, 30 year, every newsletter you ever published. I want it. And yeah, joined every UFO organization, but took the field investigators test as soon as I realized they had one. And it was not easy, by the way. It was pretty hard. Even though it was a take home test, there was a couple hundred questions on photography and astronomy and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, that's how I got involved in MUFON.
I have a pretty deep respect for MUFON because of how how kind of deep they look into situations. And it doesn't seem like an organization that's quick to say, well, that was an alien spacecraft. Like it seems like a lot of boxes need to be checked before they are willing to kind of go that route, so to speak. So I've always, as investigators, really looked up to and admired that organization. I reached out to them when I had my sighting, and again, it was validating because, due to that hard work and investigation, it demonstrated that there was nothing provably in the sky at that moment. So um, it was it was nice to get that email to, again, just kind of reiterate that I wasn't crazy.
Yeah, I feel for UFO witnesses because that's often how they feel. And it's so awesome when you can get confirmation. Like if someone else saw what you saw, but they were in a different area, that's so amazing. Especially, I mean, not only for a witness, but for a researcher as well. Because you're like, wow, look, here's
What
absolute evidence that this person is telling the truth. And
what was
yeah,
incredible was I was actually technically working at the time. I was outside and I was walking back to the building where I worked at, and I was doing home health at the time. And we had two clients, and there was another worker there. When I got back to the house, they had also witnessed it, and we all came out. And like I said, it lasted about 30 minutes, and just the four of us watched it together
Oh,
too. So it was nice to have that solidarity of here's three other humans who for sure are seeing what I'm seeing right now.
yeah, I've talked
Uh,
to people who are alone, and when you have a dramatic encounter, it causes you to really question what you're seeing, yourself, your sanity, even. So you're lucky you had witnesses, because when you don't, boy, it's a lot more difficult to process.
right. And with that skepticism, I guess that's a good segue into one of the questions that I had for you is as a researcher and an author, how do you deal with the skepticism and the criticism from, I guess, the mainstream media or mainstream way of thinking when it comes to ufology or the other paranormal that you discuss?
Yeah, well, I just confront it head on. It was very frustrating at first because you go on the radio, and I've been on TV as well a number of times over the years, and they'll bring on, not so much a skeptic, but a debunker, someone who's basically attacking your research, yourself, and the witnesses. I'm trying to think of another field of research that does that. It's totally unfair. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't like it. It's very frustrating. And I don't really care what people think because I've certainly cleared a room at a party talking about UFOs. But then privately, people will come up to me, friends, family, and coworkers, say, I didn't want to say when everyone else is there, but could I ask you about this thing I saw? And it can be anything, not just UFOs. So I think publicly, a lot of people profess skepticism and disbelief, but privately, almost everybody has had something paranormal happen to them. So I think it's important that we just discuss this subject without judgment, without ridicule. If you don't believe it, that's fine, but that's belief, and that's a completely different thing from knowledge. If you haven't had the experience, how can you be equipped to even pass any judgment on this? You don't know if you haven't seen it. So I, yeah, it's a real problem in this field. I mean, it really is.
Yeah,
So
it's almost like the scientific method just it isn't allowed to happen in paranormal research at all. Even with the internet the way it is now, and guys like Mick West who are out there, who almost it seems like their entire existence is built upon hindering the research that you do.
when I'm talking to a skeptic, my challenge to them is to take a look at the evidence. How can you say that you don't believe in this if you haven't even read a single book? If you haven't talked to any witnesses? Because that's what I found. And that was certainly true for me. I refused to read a UFO book because I had already made up my mind. So that's what my challenge to anyone who's skeptic. Particularly, ask people you love and trust, people you know are not going to lie to you. And I think you'll get a real surprise when you find out that, your spouse or your parents or a best friend is having some kind of encounter and didn't tell you because you're kind of being pigheaded about it.
Right. Yeah. Um, you mentioned a couple of minutes ago about cover up, and certainly that's something that you've talked about historically speaking. I was wondering if we could get into that just a little bit, but then also kind of lead into where we're at now in 2023 with, just a couple of months ago, we have hearings in front of Congress finally about ufology and it's what's going on in Peru right now in front of the Mexican Congress. Are we witnessing the end of a cover up, or is the slow drip actually happening, so to speak, as far as disclosure goes? Or, I've also seen some people say that, the things that we are witnessing are almost, tools to blind us from what's really going on. And I was wondering if I can get your take on that.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that theory. It's the slow drip propaganda tools to blind us theory.
Okay.
And I hate to, you know, say it, but I think that's what is exactly happening. Because frankly, the cover up is real. It's demonstrable, it's easily provable. For decades, our governments have been lying on this subject. And we know this. They've been spending our tax dollars, a lot of time, money, and energy to label all witnesses as idiots, basically. Any UFO sighting is a hoax, a hallucination, or a misperception. There's nothing to it. And recently, it's reached a point where that's just no longer credible. You can't do that anymore because the evidence is out there in the public arena. And so I think that's why they said, okay, we think there might be something to it, but we don't know what it is. I don't think that's true for a second. I think they know exactly what it is. I think they've got the Roswell UFO crash and the bodies and 100 other UFO crash retrievals. I think they've got all the evidence they need to know exactly what this is. And they're not being truthful or transparent. So we're bringing these whistleblowers in front of Congress, and they're talking about, their experiences with UFOs, which are largely sightings. I mean, even David Grush didn't have any actual experience. He's talking about what other people told him or photographs he might have seen. And they're not bringing on anyone who's seen an ET or any case involving landing traces or anyone who claims to have been on board a craft. That's not disclosure. This feels like propaganda to me. Disclosure would be show us the craft, show us the bodies. We know you have them. And they're not doing that. So they've lied. They're still lying. And one more thing. I mean, like recently, 3 years ago, I think it was, there was the first congressional hearings in like 30 years. And there was the two heads of defense, Ronald Moultrie and Mr. Daley. And they were asked a bunch of questions about UFOs. And one was, have we ever shot at them? And they both quickly said no. And I wanted to throw something at the TV because yes, we have. We sure have, and I can prove it. Anyone can prove it because we got the Freedom of Information documents from our own government proving this. We've shot at them many times. They were asked about the Malmstrom incident, which, if you don't know about that, it occurred in March of 1967, where UFOs came down over Malmstrom Air Force Base and shut down our nuclear missiles. And they said, we have no reporting on that. I had to laugh at that one too, because that could not possibly be true. If you're the head of the Defense Department, you know everything that goes on at any missile base, particularly if it's nuclear. So this is just another example of why I am done with these guys. They're not going to tell the truth ever, I don't think. Not voluntarily. They're not now. So I don't know. I'm skeptical.
No, okay. Those are really good points. Stuff that I might have even allowed myself to ignore when it was happening, because I remember just almost being giddy with excitement when they finally were airing that hearing a couple of months ago. But you just kind of put everything into perspective there. You're absolutely right.
It's not all bad news, though. I mean, the Congress people did say their UFOs are real. I thought, okay, well, that's something. They said some of us have seen them. I thought, wow, okay. Then he said, but I'm not going to name names. And then I got angry. I'm like, well, why not? Name names. Who saw it? What did they see? You want to be truthful or transparent, you have to start somewhere. But they said there is a cover up, and the Pentagon's not cooperating. I'm like, wow, that went a little farther than I thought you would go. So, and it's bringing a lot of people into this subject. So there's good things happening. It is absolutely a new era because there's been no movement whatsoever at all in official circles for decades.
My concern with this new era was, what is the state of humanity really in to handle this? Like, when all we're doing is just kind of looking at our phones and just our heads are down and we're scrolling through, like, are we equipped to handle that? Or does this new generation of humans even care that a cover up is going on, so to speak? That's something that I've been thinking about and wanted to broach with you for the last couple of weeks, because I guess one of the arguments for a cover up is that, you know, we aren't trusted as regular people to handle the truth of the situation, and the government is taking upon themselves to keep it from us because of that. But I always kind of thought that that was not true. Obviously, individuals like yourself, and then people like us who, read the books and follow along. I always thought that we could handle that pretty easily. But now we have this new generation of kids who are just scrolling through their phones 24/7 and on TikTok. Uh,
Yeah.
can they handle that, like, if faced with it?
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, if our government is handling it, what makes them so special? They're handling it and they're not panicking. Well, maybe they are. I don't know. But I feel like, if the younger generation, and I've talked to a lot of people who are quite young, I've certainly interviewed kids as well. And if you talk to people, they all believe in UFOs. Anyone under the age of 20 or 30 pretty much knows they're real, has heard about them. Everyone on Earth knows what a UFO is. I think we're now at a point where we absolutely can't accept it. Not to say that there aren't some people who are going to have a hard time, because there are skeptics, and there are people who are dug into skepticism, and people who might be super religious and just don't have a space for it in their worldview might have a little bit of a hard time with it. But, we all have to adjust our belief system every now and then when new knowledge comes along. That's the history of humanity. And I think we'll be just fine. We've handled the nuclear threat for how many years now? 50, 100? We've dealt with all kinds of plagues and, this sort of thing, and wars. And this is just another little thing. But I agree, people are kind of wrapped up in events that are perhaps, I don't even know how to put it, but everyone's talking about celebrities and politics and sports and things that aren't going to have the huge impact that I think open official contact with extraterrestrials would. That would change everything. Yeah, that's going to shake some people up. And I think it's probably inevitable at some point, because you can't hide the sky. Sooner or later, disclosure is going to happen. And if this is a real phenomenon, and I think it is, sooner or later, the ETs are going to show up in a way that's absolutely undeniable. And an example would be the Phoenix Lights, which occurred in 1997, I think it was. If that were to happen today, everyone with their cell phones would turn it up and film, and game over. We're done. It's real, and you cannot go back. So we're almost there.
You mentioned that you've spoken with young people, and you have a series of books. I believe there's two, but if I'm wrong, please correct me, about UFO contact at schoolyards, playgrounds. And I thought that was incredibly interesting, because outside of that really big playground UFO contact that happened, I believe, in Africa a few years ago, I've just never heard much about this. And I talked to John about it before you came on, and he hasn't either. And I was curious if what your thoughts are, that why is the mainstream media ignoring this specifically, since there does seem to be quite a lot of those sightings actually occurring?
Yeah. Well, I think it's deliberate. I think there's a media clampdown on this subject. And the vast majority of cases, almost all of them, do not reach the mainstream media. And for that matter, most people still don't report their sightings. And when I found out about the schoolyard cases, I'd heard of the one you mentioned, which was in Rua, Zimbabwe. And it was some time ago, I think 1994. But there was another really famous one in 1967 at Westall High School in Melbourne, Australia. It's their most famous and widely viewed sighting in that country. And there's another really famous one in Florida, actually, Opelika, Florida, at Crestview Elementary School. I started thinking, well, gosh, there's a lot of these. And most of them never got past the local paper and really didn't even get into UFO books because it slid under my radar. It knocked me over when I found out that there was over 100 of these cases. And that's why I put together a book on that. And I'm going to have to put together another one because I got 100 more. I'm not kidding. This is absolutely a thing. I think our governments know about it for sure. And we know they've tried to cover it up. They actively threatened students at Westall High School and said, you are not to talk about this. And other schools as well. It's so interesting because looking at all those cases, I did a statistical study with 100 cases. That's a lot to work from. And I found that half were elementary schools where, really young kids who had never heard of a UFO and really didn't have any fear at all. These weren't scary for them. And they're very low level sightings, long lasting. And in 1/3 of the cases, these craft actually land right next to the school, right next to the playground. ETs come out. I don't know why this isn't front page news. It absolutely should be. There's photographic evidence, there's landing trace evidence, animal effects. I mean, there's physical evidence of all different kinds of these incidents. It should be front page news. I'm just thinking that the cover up has been very effective in making people have been essentially brainwashed. That's why, and the media is cooperating along with it. It's owned by these, all. We're dealing with a real problem here in terms of how the suppression of knowledge. It's not just in the UFO field, but this is a very important subject to what I would call the secret government, or the cabal, or the 1%, or the military-industrial complex. The folks behind the cover-up, they're working really hard, and still are, to cover this up when it should be front-page news.
What do you think their goal is with the cover-up? What are they hiding, and why do they feel the need to hide it?
Yeah, that's the $1,000,000 question. Ultimately, I think it comes down to money and power and control, because this is an oil-based economy, and if we have free energy, which is what these craft represent, well, that's going to dig right into their profits. And if people find out that we're not alone in this universe, and that we have friends out there, and that there are civilizations out there that live without money and without poverty and without discrimination and the unequal distribution of wealth and without wars, and without disease, that would change everything. I think the real, honest to God, ET threat is to the power structure of the power elite and their control over humanity, their basic enslavement of humanity. Because let's face it, most people are just struggling to survive, day to day, check to check. And that would change everything. I think that's what's really behind the cover-up, is greed, power, control, money.
You used a key word there that really jumped out at me, and you said friends. We have friends out there, so these ETs are our friend. They're friendly. They are here for peaceful reasons, and it's not something that we should worry about.
That's my assessment. I know there are other researchers out there who disagree, but I know there are some researchers out there who are government plants. I don't trust them for a second. There are researchers out there who are flat out liars. There is a concerted campaign to paint the UFO phenomena as a threat, as negative, which is ridiculous because I put out a book. My first book was all about healing cases because I bought into that narrative. Like, oh my gosh, people are being kidnapped against their will and experimented on by bug-like greys who have no emotions. And that's just flat out not true. It took me about 10 or 20 cases before I started to come around. But now I've got hundreds under my belt. And I can tell you exactly what happens when people are taken on board. And my research is reflected by other, who I would call impartial researchers, who don't have an agenda. And what happens is, yeah, you're physically examined, and that can be very scary, and often is. But that's when they will heal you. And they will take you down to the engine room and show you how the craft works, explain it in detail. They'll take you up to what we would call the observation deck and show you a field of stars, or the Earth far below, or the moon, or other planets in our solar system. That's not uncommon. They'll take you to the control room. So this is how we fly the craft. Would you like to sit in the seat and try it? And I know how this is going to sound to skeptics, but if you look into this, this is exactly what is happening. When someone gets any communication from ETs, it's always, don't be afraid. We're not here to hurt you. No harm will come to you. And then they will give you warnings. Like, you are messing around with nuclear weapons. Do you realize you're on the pathway to destroying yourselves and your planet? Stop polluting your planet. Stop cutting down the forests. They're very concerned about war and aggression. That's probably one of the most common messages. These are all very positive things. They will wake you up psychically. So people come away from their experiences experiencing telepathy and astral projection and past life recall, remote viewing, healing. I mean, you name it, precognition. So if you take an objective look at what actually happens, I challenge anyone to say that they're here to take over or eat us for lunch. They've been here forever. We know this for thousands upon thousands of years before recorded history, because we've got stone carvings, cave paintings, hieroglyphs, Middle Age wood carvings. The Romans knew about them. They called them flying shields. We know that they've been around forever. They're not here to take over. That's ridiculous. There are some people who are putting forth that narrative, and it's not supported by the first-hand cases. So
I think if they were going to take over,
yeah,
they could have done it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess, one of the things that I can think of off the top of my head, like if I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, they've been here this long and they haven't destroyed us, but what is your opinion on, if they have this message for us, why have they not just come down and said, stop doing this, in that same vein?
Like in the middle of the Super Bowl when people are actually going to watch.
Yeah, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? There was one in Italy during a soccer match. Some 20,000 people saw it. And, the schoolyards, of course, there's these big waves of sightings over city centers every 10 or 20 years or so. So they're basically announcing their presence. But no, they're not coming down, taking over, because I think, well, this is what they've told contactees who have asked them that exact question. They said, no, we're not doing that. It's up to you to solve your own problems. We can only intervene to a certain degree. We can help those who are helping others, but it's up to you. I just looked into a case recently about this guy who was came upon a UFO in the forest in Austria. He was super excited and he started complaining to them about the state of the world. This was during the late 40s, I believe, or 50s. And a lot of totalitarianism going on in Europe. And he was complaining about that and said, why don't you just come down? And they said, no, that's your job. You have to make an effort to improve your society. And I think this is something every parent knows. You can't tie your kids' shoes until they're an adult and then send them out in the world, because they will immediately be completely lost. It's, they've said it over and over again. They've even used the word karma in first-hand contact cases. This is up to you to solve your own problems. They've said it every way they can. They'll warn you. They'll intervene to a certain degree, healing people. I've got like 20, 30, 40 cases now where people have been rescued from perhaps car accidents or falls or being lost in the snow or all kinds of really hairy situations. They have helped people out. But no, it's up to us. We have to start electing leaders who have our best interests in mind. That's a good place to start, I think.
Well, we can't elect them because they're up in space. Come down so we can vote for you.
I'm ready. I mean, if they want to land, I would rather worship our alien overlords than these guys who are running our countries.
Yeah, the old guys with the oil money that are doing the ones to suppress it.
Because people will talk about, how can you say that they're friendly? I'm like, look at humans. You're telling me humans are friendly? We've been exterminating each other for as long as we've been able to. We're the ones who kill, murder, steal, lie, cheat, do horrible, horrible things to each other. And we're kind of imposing our own cultural values on ETs sometimes, because that's how we treat each other. They do not treat people that way.
I wanted to ask, and this might just be me looking for answers because I suffer from this pretty terribly, but is there a connection, in your opinion, with sleep paralysis and contact with the ET, or do you not adhere to that particular line of thinking?
Well, let me put it this way. People who have contact will experience often a temporary paralysis when the ETs are coming into the room and pulling them on board. Sleep paralysis is something completely different. This is when your brain secretes a chemical, so basically you don't act out your dreams. And this can happen. I mean, I've had it many, many times because I've practiced astral projection, trying to go out of body and lucid dream.
I would be remiss if I let you leave here today without getting into that. As soon as we're able to segue into that, I have been dying to get into that with you.
Well, it's connected to that for sure, because that is basically a something you will experience if you're on the verge of being able to do that. And most people will experience that at some point. They're like thrashing around and they're suddenly jerk when they're sleeping, when they broke free of sleep paralysis. And it can be very scary because sleep paralysis is essentially waking up during a dream, and you can sense figures moving around you and hear sounds, and it can be really scary, and emotions are magnified. So if you start to feel fear, it's almost a biofeedback loop, and it comes back at you like terror. So it's a psychological thing that's absolutely real, but no, it does not explain UFO contact even remotely, because people who are taken on board a craft are missing from their rooms. They're not there. They're taken together into a craft. Their bodies are affected, they're healed, or given an implant. There's landing traces on the ground outside. The neighbors are seeing the craft hovering over their house. I just need to underline this, that sleep paralysis does not explain onboard UFO experiences, because there are books out there by so-called scientists who say, oh, this is how you explain it. No, it's not true. I've experienced sleep paralysis, and that is absolutely a completely different thing. Though, yeah, some people will experience paralysis when they're being pulled on board, because we have a very strong fear reaction to anything that's different. We're trained to fear. And so the ETs have to take precautions, because a person will lash out and punch them in the face. got 20 or 30 cases of that, of people just absolutely losing their minds when ETs come into the room. And you fight them all the way. Even like, like a, you would fight a doctor or a nurse. Talk to any nurse or doctor and they'll tell you patients can be horrible to them, cursing and spitting and very combative. So that's what the ETs are dealing with, people who are absolutely panicking.
And they're just there to help.
Yep.
Well, that's a good time to segue. I think we could talk for 6 days about ETs, but since you did bring it up in the explanation for the sleep paralysis, like I said, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you some questions about this. You are on record with saying that you have. I don't want to use the word mastered, but you frequently participate in out of body experiences. And I was hoping to kind of get you to explain that a little bit and talk about it. After listening to a couple interviews, one by yourself and then one by another expert, I actually can't remember off the top of my head this second. I tried this, and basically I experienced what is described in the beginning, where you're falling asleep and your body almost starts to vibrate as a
Yeah.
the beginning. And this was after maybe 3 nights of pretty hard meditation trying to achieve this. And as soon as I felt the vibrations, I found myself looking down, and I'm looking at my body in bed, and I'm laying there next to my wife. Like I could give you every single detail about what was happening in that moment. And I immediately, as soon as I made eye contact with my body in the bed, I freaked out and I got so scared. And I was like, I'm gonna die. This actually isn't supposed to happen. And I immediately ended it and forced myself awake. And I was curious if that is normal for a novice to kind of go through.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's so awesome you had that experience after only 3 days of trying. It took me almost 2 months before I had that exact experience. Yeah, I thought I had died too. And I kind of regretted it standing outside my body thinking, well, I'm dead now. What have I done? And cold dread swept through me until I got back in and I woke up and I'm like, wow, that's the third time did it. So the first few times were super exciting. The third was super scary. That's absolutely normal. And it's normal to have a wave of emotion, of whether it's fear or excitement or really any emotion, to have it pull you back. And it takes a while to just learn how to overcome that. Just be focused and calm, and you're able to extend it. But what you're talking about with your body vibrating is 100% natural. That's called the vibratory state. And basically, it's just a process of relaxing to the point where you lift out of your body. We each have an astral body. This is who we truly are. The physical body is just a shell that we inhabit to interact with the third dimension. But we come from source, from the other side. That's who we really are. We're immortal beings coming down for a little adventure on Earth. In a way, we're projecting down. I think in astral projection, we think of it as leaving our body. Really, we're going home to our true body. We're now projecting into a physical body. So we're looking at it kind of the wrong way. But everybody does it. It's 100% natural. It's as safe as sleeping. We do it every night. Most people just don't remember except in snippets and flying dreams and bits like this. But we're all conscious on the other side doing our thing. It's just a matter of learning how to remember it, really, and becoming conscious while you're doing it in a way that you can connect it to your third dimensional consciousness. But it's so much fun. I mean, I can't recommend it enough. I started doing it After my mom died in 1984, tragically at a pretty young age, 49, I was 19, and it was devastating, of course, because I thought she was gone forever. I mean, I didn't believe in life after death. And this all came about kind of the same time as the UFOs, so my whole world changed. But she started coming to me in dreams, and I'm thinking, well, this feels like her. It can't be her because there's no such thing as ghosts or life after death. I saw her spirit. I saw her ghost. And I thought, oh God, I'm losing my mind. But that's when I stumbled on this subject of out-of-body experiences and learned how to do it. And yeah, I don't know if I would say I'd mastered it, but I got pretty darn good. I mean, I still do it. And you can go directly to the other side and meet with your deceased loved ones. Talk with what we would call enlightened masters and learn about your past lives. Go to the Akashic Library. Go to learning temples or healing temples. Or just fly around Earth or into the moon or wherever. I mean, you can do just about anything. It's crazy. If people knew about this, they would spend so much more time on trying to achieve it because it's so much fun and it
I
absolutely
actually
changes your life.
I actually just recently listened to your one interview on Midnight in the Desert, I think from 2015.
Right?
And I didn't know a whole lot about this topic, but just listening to your interview on there, like it just literally blew my mind. Like and one of the super interesting things that you were talking about on there was about when that you could pass through physical objects and you would still feel them. Like you could feel the textures. Like, what is that like?
Oh, it's crazy. It's kind of like diving into a pool of really cold water. You feel it, it's a thicker environment, but imagine the water actually goes through your entire body. It's weird. I mean, it's a weird
It's
feeling. Walking
yeah.
through a wall and you can I remember one time I'm like, there's a brick wall. That's different. Let's try that. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to just leave my eyes open this time. I'm out of body, seeing this brick wall. And I walked through it and you could see it, you could feel it, you can actually taste it. It's subtle, but you can taste it as well, smell it. All your senses are heightened, especially vision. I mean, you can see, I'm a little bit nearsighted, but when you're out of body, you can see. I mean, you have zoom vision. You can see a mile away a little bug on a leaf if you want. You can see once you get good at it, 360 degrees around you. And yeah, another time, I'd always fly under the telephone wires or over because it's a little bit nerve wracking. You're seeing like, no, I'm not going to go through that. But I read about someone else who's like, you can just go through them if you want. And I of course pick up all the books on this I can find because they give you ideas of what you can do. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And I went right through the telephone wires and it went zap, really bright. It scared the living daylights out of me for a second. Yeah, I've learned it's as safe as sleeping. And in fact, it's not only safe, it's beneficial in so many ways because you get a lot of energy from doing it. It opens up your psychic centers, so you start having dreams that come true and healing abilities and precognition and clairvoyance and telepathy. I mean, it's crazy the stuff that happens. It's so much fun. And healing, yeah, people have healed themselves of cuts and bruises, of flus, of chronic diseases like multiple sclerosis or arthritis or sarcoidosis, a chronic liver disease. That's what Bruce Moan cured himself of, a disease, which are often connected to a past life. And no, it's not dangerous. You're not going to get locked out of your body or go too far away or get lost or get possessed. I scoured the literature on this because there are some people who talk about, oh, you can get possessed if you do that. Like, I couldn't find any. I couldn't find a single account of any danger at all, other than it being sometimes scary, and sometimes you encounter bad ghosts, evil spirits maybe. But I've done that. It's a little scary at first, the first time, but it's really interesting after you kind of get over the initial shock of it. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's so much fun. And there's only a few things keeping people from doing it. One is fear. People think, oh, that sounds scary. It's a little scary your first few times, but trust me, you get over that pretty quick. And another is just skepticism. They're like, that's not real. You can't do that. Yes, you can. Prove me wrong. Experience it yourself. Don't believe me. Try it. I really encourage people to just try it, and you'll be surprised. And the only
That,
other obstacle would be laziness. People just don't put forth the effort because it does take some effort.
yeah, I agree with that. And as somebody who actually did accomplish it, even if just for a brief second, I can testify that all it took was just a little bit of work each night that I went to sleep, and just putting just that little bit of effort in. And it was, like I said, night three it happened. And I don't know if the fear that I felt when it occurred kind of created a mental block. I've never been able to do it ever since. But I do know that you spoke of healing properties, and I don't know if you can tell on my camera or not, but I actually have this sweet neck brace on right now. Um, I had I had a pretty serious neck injury that occurred from, I don't know, about 12 years ago. I was struck by a Mack truck, and I luckily survived. I was in a car. It moved my frame over 24 inches. It threw my car back 30 feet. The only thing that really happened was I had to have my head stapled together. It was 10 staples, but I walked away from that. I was out of the hospital that day, but it left me with pretty chronic neck issues. So I finally, about a month, well, not even a month ago, had this neck surgery done. And one thing that I was really hoping that I could do during this healing process was try to do this again and get to the other side and maybe see if I could, you know, help with the healing process like you described. And I haven't been able to at least cognitively achieve that again. But it's something that while I have this annoying collar on, I'm like really trying to do every single night.
Yeah, well, I think that's great. It it can be a steep learning curve for people. I've taught people how to do this. I've done workshops for people, and some do it the first day, second day, third day. So you're fortunate that way. Others it can take you a year. But again, I think if you really dedicate yourself, it's kind of like learning a musical instrument. If you can't play guitar and you pick one up, you might be a natural, and you're off and running, or the piano, or a new language, or a computer program. It takes a little effort and a little bit of applied knowledge. But if you keep at it, you'll absolutely be successful. And the real key is simple, it's relaxation. And yeah, letting go. It's pretty simple. It's just, I've outlined it sort of a 3-4 step process. First, you physically relax, then you mentally relax, and then you do visualizations and affirmations. And if you do this, you know, with a discipline, you'll absolutely be successful. And also trying to really remember what's going on at night. So when you wake up in the morning, because you're doing it every night. Uh, and that is amazing to me because why aren't we remembering it? Because we've compartmentalized our consciousness to a degree that when you get out of bed, you can have a series of dreams, and the second you move, they're erased. So you have to just kind of lie there in bed, don't move, and try to remember what the heck you were doing. Where were you? Who were you with? And what were you doing? Do that each morning, and it starts to come back to you. And here's another real trick. Throughout the day, ask yourself if you're out of body right now, which sounds stupid and kind of ridiculous, but here's the problem. We're unconscious, or we think we are, 1/3 of the time when we're asleep. We're actually out there living our lives astrally, but it's so real, it never even occurs to us that we might not be awake. So this is called unconscious astral. And when you start having out of body experiences, you meet these people, most of people on Earth, and they're not aware. So if you start asking yourself throughout the day, could I be out of body right now? And then test reality by taking a pen and throwing it up into the air to see if it floats, or sticking your finger and trying to stick it through your desk or your chair.
Or light socket.
Anything that will kind of test reality. Because what will happen is you will do that when you're out of body, and you'll be thinking you're at work or something, like looking at the clock, like when is, I'd like to get out of work, and you grab your pencil and you throw it up in the air, and it floats right in front of you. And boy, the shock you will have when you see that floating pen or whatever, or stick your finger through the wall. You'll find out that you are out of body, and the whole environment will fade away, and you realize you're floating above your bed, or perhaps already on the other side, or in your backyard, or at a friend's house, or all over the place. That's reality testing, and that's a really good method. But gosh, the experiences you can have. When my mom died, I was so devastated for a couple of years until I finally saw her. And that reunion is just, as amazing as you would think it would be. And also, when you go out of body, that's the superior body. It's stronger, it's faster, it's smarter. It can teleport, it can do telekinesis, it can fly, levitate. You can do all these things, and you age regress. So the first thing that happens to me when I pop out of body is all my hair comes whoosh. And I really used to have really nice hair, and all my wrinkles go away. And you should see me. I'm buff. Oh man, it's so much fun. I just cannot recommend it enough. And you can do everything you do here, whether it's eating or being intimate with people, or whatever you want to do, you can do it on the other side.
But it seems to me what you're describing could be addictive. Is there any examples that you're aware of somebody who maybe starts to suffer on this side because they are so dedicated to the other side?
Me, a little bit, because I became obsessed with it. I think that's the only real danger, but it's not a danger. Because the fact is, you can't sleep 24 hours. You could try, but you can't do it. You have to get up. Each of us can only sleep for anywhere from 4 to 8 hours, maybe 10 if you're lacking sleep, but you're not going to be able to do it. Yeah, there's a danger of becoming a little obsessed with it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because it's super cool. And most people who do start having repeated experiences do go through that phase where they're like running around telling everyone, you've got to try this. You're not going to believe what's happening to me. My brothers and sisters thought I'd lost my mind. I had 3 older brothers, an older sister and a younger sister, a big family. And I'm telling them, guess what? UFOs are real. And everyone but Mark was like, Preston, you lost your mind. And I'm like, well, wait a second. I'm also going out of my body. Like, dude, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I can prove it to you. Do it. And I finally, I did teach Marco how to do it. His wife, my other sister-in-law, already did it. Never could get through to my other siblings. My oldest brother finally did it. I found out. He was keeping it secret from me. He didn't like to talk about it. But yeah, there's a little bit of a danger in terms of getting a little obsessed with it. But I think once you do it, you'll see why, because it's worth it. It enriches your life, and absolutely makes things that would seem so important seem a little bit trivial, like the problems you have on Earth. Once you start going to the other side, you realize, well, you know what? So what? I can't pay the bill this month. You know what? I'm dealing with this is all broken down and everything. You're having a real hard time because this is a tough place to live. Let's face it. We've got problems on every arena, whether it's financial or emotional or mental or relationship problems. And, all the problems we face kind of, you get a new perspective on it. And you realize, okay, you know what? This is time will get you through this. And I think the best thing is you overcome that fear of death, which is so all encompassing and paralyzing and absolutely rules our behavior. People don't realize it, but everything you do is kind of just to not get killed. You're constantly, when you drive, the things you eat, how you exercise, everything you do is ruled by that fear of death. And you overcome that. And you don't have any rush to die or anything. I don't want to give the wrong impression. But it's freeing. It's absolutely freeing doing this. And I came to look at, I go to bed at night, and I still do. I'm kind of look at your bed a little differently. It's like a doorway. Like, I can't wait. What's going to happen tonight? It's always a new adventure. In the beginning, you want to just explore the earth. You're going to go to your friend's house and see if they'll see you or something. But at some point, you're just, you know what? It's the other side where all the fun is, because the colors there and the things you can do and the people. I just recently, 2 or 3 nights ago, went out of body, and half my family, my direct family, is now passed on. My mom, my dad, 2 brothers, and nephew. I've got a lot of other people on the other side. They were all there, and they threw a party for me. I couldn't believe it. They were kind of celebrating. I was, getting a little bit down because the world right now is just a mess. And they're like, "No, you're fine. Let's have a party." It was so awesome. It was so cool.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Do people on the other side know what's happening back here on this side, or do you have to tell them?
No, they know.
Okay.
They are probably visiting you every day, as near as I can tell. They're very, very much aware. They can read your minds. There's a
Uh-oh.
veil between the worlds, which we can't see. It's like a one-way mirror. It's exactly what it's like. They can see you, but you can't see them until you reach that vibration, I guess, or that elevated psychic awareness, like a medium. Mediums see ghosts all the time. I haven't gotten to that point, honestly. I sometimes sense spirits. It has happened. I've heard them a few times, but they can absolutely see you, and they know everything that's going on, and sometimes even before it happens. Because it's different on the other side. Time flows a little differently. Hard to describe, but you can see events unfolding, and when you start having a lot of out of body experiences, you'll come back with that, with precognition. And it's so cool when that happens, because it operates throughout the day. You'll see something on TV and you just know what's coming up next. I remember one time I woke up real quick, and because I'd seen this horse drowning, and sure enough, there it was. It was on TV. Or ship sinking. I saw a guy trapped in a chimney. And I'm like, gosh, what's he doing there? And I woke up. He was a criminal who had tried to sneak into someone's house down a chimney. And they had to tear apart the whole roof. And I was just watching it laughing because I saw it. I saw this all. If it's anything that interests you personally, you'll probably get some precognition of it.
How far in the future can you look into in that regard then? As far as that precognition goes, like, is there a limit as to how far you can see, or if you are even able to look to that certain degree, how much of it do you remember when you come back?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's more of a feeling. Sometimes it's very vivid. You know the events precisely. But it can go up to years. I remember one day once it was 3 days. I was sure the bug was going to come out of my shoe, and I was obsessed with, a spider being in my shoe. And after the 3rd day, this enormous freaking spider crawled out of my shoe. I'm like, well, I knew it. I knew that was going to happen. and things like that. I remember when the pandemic struck. It was about a month before. I was just out of my mind. I'm like, something is going down. I can feel it. I'm really sad. I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to stock up. I did it the week before the shelves went bare. I'm like, wow. Only thing I forgot was toilet paper. I'm like, well, shoot. So it varies. For me, it's usually that day. I will have something, and that day it's, this person had a haircut, or someone gave me this gift, or like Tiger Woods, he had his car accident. I knew it. I knew it because I saw it happen before it actually happened. And a few times you want to warn people, but it's hard to pin it down sometimes.
It almost sounds like that this, for a lot of people, could explain deja vu at like a lower level. Like maybe they're not realizing some of this, that they're seeing this ahead of time. Because I feel like every day of my life is deja vu. Like I just keep reliving things that I've already known about, but I've never
Yeah.
done astral, the projection. But
Well,
I'm
that's
wondering if there's a
100%.
link there.
Yeah, that's what deja vu is. I mean, deja
Yeah.
vu can be a past life if you're going to another country and you're like, gosh, I've been here. But deja vu, because I've had that, and I've connected it to precognition. Because I'd be sitting there at work, I'm like, gosh, I'm getting deja vu, and I think my boss is gonna stand up and turn up the radio really loud, which she would never do because she's strict, but she did, and it started out as deja vu, and I had that several times, and then suddenly you remember the dream or the vision, I guess. Once dreamt my boss came running up to my desk and said, Preston, I saw a UFO. It was big, it was yellow. We were all so amazed. Everyone was pointing at it. And I'm like, this is not going to happen. My boss is kind of skeptical. He's very religious. And he came walking up to my desk that morning. And I'm like, oh no, he's standing right in front of my desk. This is just like my dream. Puts his hands on my desk. I'm like, here we go. If he tells me he saw a UFO, I'm going to lose my mind. He says, guess what, Preston? I saw a UFO. It was big. It was bright. It was yellow. We all saw it. And he started laughing. And I'm looking at him like, he says, I'm just kidding. I'm like, oh, God. I thought, in the dream it was real. I thought he was telling the truth. But in reality, no, he was just kidding.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm glad I got to talk to you about that for a little bit. Like I said, it's something that just it fascinates me to no end, and I know that it's kind of maybe loosely tied into remote viewing, which I've also tried a couple of times as well. I had a really good friend who we tried it one night, and um, the goal was they were going to think of something, I was going to draw it. And I started to draw the correct thing, but then started to second guess it. So I crossed it out and then drew something else. And then the next day when we met up, she had told me what it was. And for a second, I was like, whoa, okay, I started drawing that. And then I got in my head about it. So these sort of like astral elements really fascinate me about as much as anything else. But I lean towards them because I have had experiences with them. And similarly to my UFO experience, there's something I can pinpoint, like it's tangible to me. I know, I've never seen a Bigfoot. As much as I love Bigfoot, I've never had that tangible experience with a Sasquatch. So I can't sit here and say with 100% certainty one way or the other about a Sasquatch. But I have left my body and I have seen that UFO. And I may or may not have started to successfully remote view once. So these elements really, really fascinate me. And I'm just so stoked I had the opportunity to talk to you about it. I just really want to reiterate how grateful I am that you came on to talk to us.
Oh, hey, it's a pleasure. Yeah, it's so much fun to experience it for yourself. When I found out so many people I knew were seeing UFOs, I was like, I need to see one. When I found out about ghosts, of course, I started going to every haunted place I could find, and ended up, I've had all these experiences. I did have 2 Sasquatch experiences. I've seen ghosts, been out of body. had many UFO sightings, because it's one thing to read about it. And then you might believe it, but you don't know. Until you experience it, you don't know. And so it's so much fun when you have that experience. You're like, wow, this is real. It absolutely is real.
Yeah, 100%. And um, I'm gonna have to have you back on if you would like to. I would really like to hear more about those Sasquatch experiences and get deeper into UFOs maybe sometime. But we've taken almost I can't believe over an hour of your time. This seems like it's been 10 minutes to me.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. It's been
Uh,
an awesome conversation. So thanks for having me on.
yeah, awesome. Is there anything that you're doing right now? Anything that you want to promote? Any books or any like lectures, or is there anything that you have going on that we can tell?
Just this book I just put out, Humanoids and High Strangeness. So I'm working hard to publicize that. Always working on new projects. So yeah, I've got a website. If someone wants to reach out to me, a YouTube channel. I'm all over social media. My books are available on Amazon. And I'm going to be putting out a new book on my Not From Here series about UFOs. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to plug some of my stuff. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again for coming on. And uh, it's a little silly, but I always sign off every show with thanks for squatching.
Thanks for squatching.
So thanks for squatching, everybody. Again, Preston Dennett, and go check out everything that he has going on because he's a fascinating guy.
Absolutely.